looking for a savior beneath these dirty sheets. I've been raising up my hands, driving nothing alien. Where are those angels when you need them? Why do we crucify ourselves every day? I crucify myself, and nothing I did was good enough for you. Crucify myself every day. Crucify myself. My heart's sick of being. I said my heart's sick of being. Chains. Oh, chains. Why do we chains? Crucify ourselves every day.
All right, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. I do apologize that we have to stay off camera. Maybe we will briefly come back on camera just to say hello to everybody and see if the connectivity is doing okay. So, welcome to my humble abode, Beth Martins. Thanks for being here. How are you today, ma'am?
I'm really good. Thank you for having me in your humble abode. It's really nice to be here.
Well, I won't call you man. Sometimes people feel like they're too old. I know you're not old, and like I'm glad that you can spend some time with me over here. And this is a great opportunity for people and myself to get to know you a little bit better based on your journey. I see that you are frozen over there, so I'm just gonna say hello for now, and I'm gonna stay off camera. So uh, uh, I do apologize, but yeah. So it's kind of early in the morning. What time is it over there again?
It's just after 11 now.
Okay. All right. So yeah, that's we have Beth here, and then we're going to be talking about her life and her journey. And we're going to try to catch up to where she is now, and then see where we can go from there. But Beth, let's start from the very beginning. So tell us a little bit about yourself, of your childhood, what you remember. So let's go from there.
All right, so we're going way back. My childhood was, um, good and bad. Nothing too freaky. But I had parents that were extremely involved with their new business that they created when I was around 8 years old, and it was my first foray into entrepreneurialism because not long after they started the business, I began working for them. And I thought it was fun. It was kind of a game for me. I would like to, I would their storeroom was my playroom, so I could have like a whole bunch of pens and staples and chalkboards and things like that. So I was involved in that, and my parents were, they came from, uh, I don't know if long line, but people that had been oppressed, people that had been war torn from the Russian Revolution, and God knows even what happened on my mom's side of the family that nobody wanted to talk about, and it was um, it was cause for a great deal of what began a life of introspection and inward turning and learning how to feel, say, feel first generation, right? With people that had been very shut down, they'd been traumatized, they'd been brutalized. And, that was the main thing. Don't feel, don't be yourself, don't say real and true things. So there I was, right from the earliest of ages, not going for it. It didn't work for me. And so I very much
Mhm.
adopted a kind of rebel attitude towards that. I was able to see not only things happening in my own family, but in the world. I knew that things were upside down. I knew it was wrong the way that the world operated. And so I had a lot of conflict in my early life. By the time I was a teenager, I really took the bull by the horns and started to make my own decisions and bull my way through life. And I learned how to control my parents by running away and not being there and the threatening separation. So I could just, engineer things the way I wanted them to be. And got in a lot of trouble. I had a night in jail. With a partner in crime, we stole a car and ran away from Manitoba like 4 times. And then finally, the system caught up with me and separated me from that, unfortunately, terrible woman with really bad intentions. And that was the beginning of a new life. And again, capitalizing on that more introspective part and the self, being able to look at myself and begin the healing process that really needed to begin. And so I did. So that was my childhood and teenage years. And because I got a lot of that angsty stuff out of me early, I then turned full circle and became a straight A student and went to university, and I got the gold medal in anthropology, and was trying to be a much more normal person. I was tired of being the outcast, always the black sheep. And then I ended up, after my degree, knowing that I still needed to make a gainful living. I actually, at that time, started getting interested in meditation and yoga, you could say, but really it was the meditation, the contemplative art side of things. And I began traveling to India, where you are right now, and even not far from where
Mhm.
you are.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, studying with a guru
So
on a mountain.
yeah, before we get there, I have a couple questions. So, your parents are of Russian descent, who immigrated to Canada. Do you know much about your lineage?
On my dad's side of the family, they were actually from Germany originally. And then Catherine
Okay.
the Great invited them from Germany to Russia because the people were starving and they didn't know how to grow food. And the Mennonites were notorious for being able to work the land. And so they did, and they were successful in that. And so that created a lot of tension for between the two populations. You had the haves and the have-nots, and then so as the Russian Revolution started to really pick up, then and that was years in the coming. It was I believe 1917 was the actual Russian Revolution, but it was 1911 when my great grandfather was jailed for um, the charge against him was antagonizing the government. So it showed me that I have some rebel roots, let's say, and
Yeah.
they didn't lay down easy. But ultimately they ended up fleeing for their lives because the village they were living in was burnt to the ground, and children taken away. That some of my great grandfather's brothers and sisters never to be seen again, and then they fled to Canada. So that's what I know of that lineage.
Do you know much about your mother's side?
Very little. They're from Poland and the Ukraine, which is very much in the news these days. So I just know they had very hard lives. That's what I know. There was a
Mhm.
lot that
Mhm.
they didn't talk about, they didn't report. They did see Canada as a kind of panacea, new life. But as people generally know these days, you take your past with you wherever you go. So they, they continued to have a hard life, let's say.
Yeah, so there's a lot of Slavic and Germanic roots in your family, it seems. Do you have any siblings?
Yes, I have 2 sisters.
Were they also working at your what business did your parents do when you were 8 years old, and what kind of work were you doing? I'm kind of curious what kind of work an 8-year-old can be employed for.
Exactly, yeah. So it was a marketing and communication firm that my mom and dad had sister businesses. So my mom's was more in the media and monitoring the media that is very important to the corporate world. Where you, yeah, I mean, I think it used to be more important to tell you the truth, but where they cared about public opinion, they cared about what was being said about them, and then I would get involved more by the time I was 10. So I wasn't working as an 8-year old, but by the time I was 10, there was always some project that required manual labor. So if they were doing a big promotion of some kind, what was I remember one that was in particular in the food industry. I think it was for because the pork board, the Manitoba Pork Board, was one of their big clients here, and then so there was a big mailing that they were sending out to everybody back in the day. That there was a lot of snail mail, and there we were stuffing envelopes and putting little hats and little that you put on a roast where you put on the feet those little hats, and that's my memory. And so that's the kind of work my dad was always very interested in hiring his children. But I was the only child that wanted to work in that way. Not to say my sisters were lazy; they just didn't want anything to do with that business. So my dad was grooming me for being part of and eventually taking over that business was his wish. And that didn't happen.
Are you the oldest or the middle child? The youngest? Where do you fit in?
I'm in the middle.
Okay. So, like there's this whole idea about like the oldest tend to be like the most responsible, and the middle child, because they don't get as much attention, tend to become a little bit rebellious, and the youngest sometimes become like a little bit of a pampered child. Do you think that's true with your dynamics in the family?
Yes and no. I think I'd say if I think about my older sister, she suppressed any rebel instincts very, very strongly. So they didn't come up until she was more of an adult and had different kinds of problems than a child or teenager would, because they tend to forgive children and teenagers for everything. I not only had that rebel archetype, but I also had the pioneer archetype that I refer now to as a kind of king hero. I also talked about them like mermaids at times, where you're willing to break ground, you're willing to do something that's never been done before. And that was a very big attractive force to me. Also, the pioneers, when they do break ground, it's their ground. And you have a lot to show for your efforts. My family on my grandma's side, I do know about when they landed in Canada because my grandma wrote her mother's story, and they showed up to unbroken land. They actually lied to them in I believe it was in Poland, and they told them that there was homesteads in Canada. But the word for homestead in their languages, in the Slavic languages, meant home. Like farm, buildings, place to live. And here they were using the word, I don't think by mistake, to just mean an unbroken piece of land. And so they arrived in complete shock and surprise and had literally nothing. They covered their babies with their own bodies in the first nights before they had any shelters. So that pioneer spirit is very much in me. I feel like that's in my blood, in my bones. And I appreciate the ability to roll up your sleeves and create something that didn't exist yet, because it gives you a great deal of freedom and power inside of it. So that's, I think, what mainly interested me in that business. Plus, making money. I liked the feeling of independence, that I didn't have to ask permission. Could I do this? Could I do that? I started traveling at a young age because I had my own funds and I could go off and just do whatever I wanted to do.
I feel like it's important to touch on this Grand Theft Auto thing a little bit, if
Oh,
that's
okay.
indeed what happened. Can you go
Right.
into the details of that experience for us a little bit?
Yeah, I was caught up with a really I'll just say now, dangerous woman with a severe personality disorder. I've done a fair amount of reflecting to see like how did she get there, and was she in fact a victim of satanic ritual abuse? Some of the signs are there, and it took me a long time to put those pieces together. But I didn't see it for literally 20 years after the fact, but as I started to learn about satanic ritual abuse, I realized I was very possibly being groomed for a cult through her. So she was always getting me to do something out of integrity, like badass teenagers. It wasn't that hard to convince me to, stay out all night and lie about where we were and to create fake IDs and go to the bar and pick up bikers and, um, just always pushing the edge. And there was something, more more and more and more. And then there was the night where she got me to partner in stealing her dad's car out of the parkade where he lived. So we took off and we had quite an adventure all night long. And all the parents figured it out that night that we were gone and that the car was gone. So they called the police. They called in a big emergency. We came home with our tail between our legs in the morning and concocted a great big lie. Unfortunately, our lies didn't even match. We had an agreement about how our lies were going to go, and my parents dragged me off to the police station to make a report, to thinking that that was going to. I'm a gangster, indoctrinated, and I managed to hold my ground. Somehow, it was left in the realm of mystery. My parents knew that I was lying. My sisters knew I was lying. Everybody knew I was lying, but they couldn't prove it. And the car was back. So it just kind of turned into a nothing.
Okay, well, that's good. I guess, but it was like a little bit of like a Thelma and Louise type of situations, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. No, kind
So,
of crazy.
like, just moving forward, go ahead.
Oh, it was, it was a really good exercise in self empowerment because I had given myself over, I'd given control over myself to this woman because there was part of me that didn't want to assume responsibility for being such a badass myself, and I convinced myself if that I was just following her and doing her bidding, that somehow I wasn't responsible, that she was. But that's a big fat lie. Turns out I was responsible.
Of course, of course. Yeah. But, we can come up with all kinds of excuses when we were younger that make sense to us at that time. So, again, just going back a little bit, just for clarification, you got to a point where you decided to kind of shape up and you did well in school. And around what time was that? Like what age?
So by the time I made my turnaround, I was 16, going on 17.
Okay. So, like towards the end of high school days, and then you started to you know, just kind of, I don't know, like thought to yourself, I'm going to apply myself, and then you went to college or university afterwards.
Yeah, I was actually extremely grateful to have had to break up with that woman. I was unconsciously looking for a way out, and then that extreme measure of getting caught and getting thrown in jail overnight. That was the beginning of the end for me. I was able to detach myself. I was glad to have again something outside of myself making that decision that I couldn't make myself. That became a little bit of a theme as well. And so then I just wanted to be returned back to, I was a prodigal daughter. So I just wanted to turn things around and be the good one for a change, and really applied myself and studied like anything, like a mad woman, got very good marks and recognition, through that. I wanted to go to university after to continue this good image that I had begun to create for myself. I studied anthropology because it was such a big subject. It included a lot of things that I was interested in. It seemed like the least of the pigeonholes of all of the subjects because it was so broad. In anthropology, we consider everything to be related to us as humans. And so there's barely a subject that you can't go into there. I ended up specializing in cross-cultural consciousness, cross-cultural medicine and psychology. That brought me to the work of archetypes and healing systems. I always knew that with a family full of medical people, doctors and nurses and hospital admins, I knew that our medical system was highly flawed somehow, just with that, again, rebel energy inside myself. And so I was very interested in how other cultures approach that subject. And I studied about shamanism and the healing nature of, or what actually causes healing, what is consciousness, trying to use that academic portal as a way to study the esoteric inner world. I didn't go very far because by the time I, graduated with that medal and reached a kind of academic epitome, I realized I didn't want to just study about that stuff. I wanted to be doing it myself. And so that's when I began to travel. I hooked up with a program called Canadian Crossroads that sent people overseas on not study programs, but more work and life programs where you were there in some kind of service and learning capacity. And so I ended up in Nepal, which seemed kind of close to India. But I'm from the prairies. When I look at a map, I'm not very lucid because, it's all up and down in your region over there. So I thought I was so close to India. At the same time, the one of the very last classes I did in my degree to graduate was on the religions of India, and then an experimental one-time course. It was never again offered, but in meditation. And I never expected to go to India. I just chose that course thinking, oh, I just need half a credit to graduate. And then I took the course in meditation that the other had been prerequisite to. I met the meditation teacher who was there giving the class. Turned out he lived in India, there in the Kulu Valley, where I believe you are right now. So I started making
Indeed.
that. Yeah, I started making the aspirations to go and visit him, and then I got involved with that Canadian Crossroads. So I made plans to go from Nepal after my 4-month placement was over, and then I traveled to India, which was a hero's journey all by itself just to get there. It's really much
Okay.
harder.
So let me interrupt you there real quick. I have a question about your did you belong to any kind of a religion, or like a kind of a philosophical thing, like prior to going to university or during university? Were you Did you belong to any kind of a religion during that time? That's one first question.
Yeah, interesting question. This is fun because I was born and raised in a kind of Christian background. But when my sister and I were born and very young, my mom told my dad that he couldn't send money to the church anymore, that it was stupid. And so he didn't. And then they got kicked out of the church for that. So there was a kind of bitterness around it. And um, that kept them away from religion. So they didn't actually indoctrinate me in any way. It was just more in the background. My grandma would go to church. And then, interestingly, being again the rebel child, just an ongoing theme here, I picked religion up because my parents had rejected it. So I turned into a born again Christian and became evangelistic. I would get on a bus and hand out tracts and tell my cousin she was going to go to hell if she didn't accept Jesus. And so I was really, really into this. And then when everything turned as a teenager and I got more into trouble, that was when the whole satanic thing was coming for me. And there was some studying of the satanic Bible, and but it didn't go very far. Luckily, God really plucked me quickly out of that situation before I got too deep into it and couldn't get out of it. And then after that, I began to look into more of the esoteric arts. Again, by the time I'm starting to travel to India, I'm very interested in the all everything Eastern, the Tao, the Bhagavad Gita, meditation, all of those kind of contemplative arts that I um, I was getting exposed to. So that was where I came from with that. I always felt like I had a deeply spiritual
Hmm.
life and relationship with God when one way or another.
Oh, okay. So I'd like to know a little bit more about this meditation class. Can you just explain to us a little bit about like what was involved, what were they teaching you, and then like how did it affect you, or I mean, like did it actually change you in some ways?
It really did, because at the beginning, it was near impossible for me to meditate. He offered a fairly simple process of what was called Shamdhyan, so meditation on space, and the use of mantras as well, because it's very difficult to take a mind. I literally couldn't sit in meditation for more than 5 minutes at a time when I began. There was so many things firing in my mind, so many thoughts, so many inner experiences that I thought I was introverted, but at that point there was such accumulation of experiences in my system that it was really uncomfortable for me. But I kept up with it, and I kept having, or not having, but I just stuck with it and kept doing it as a practice. And I also, because I'd been a pretty um, experimental teenager, I had, used a fair amount of psychedelic drugs, for example, mushrooms and acid and all that kind of thing. And I was I was still interested in experimentation. There was one time when I had been meditating maybe about 4 months into it, and I decided I was going to take a hit of acid, this time not for the partying purposes, but for the inward journeying purposes. And this was utterly life changing when I went in and discovered things very viscerally inside myself about volition, about free will, about how our point of reference in our own attention is is the cause of experience inside yourself. So I was able to see things that, like, for example, I was able to see synapses and pathways that were created by habitual thoughts. And I could see how those pathways would get tangled and full of dirty electricity. And I could see that I had volition to either go on those dirty paths or to withhold that. And then in the highest point, like, there were lots of really actually frightening times also. I was really freaking myself out. And then I had a breakthrough, and because I remembered about meditation, and and I sat and I actually read one line in a book that was written by that guru I was talking about, and it said, when an ice cube
Hmm.
melt it said, when an ice cube melts, it realizes it was always water. And that's when things
Mm. Mm.
yeah, and that's when things began to soften for me. I began to really relax into it. And then I had the full, again, volition of my point of reference, and I was able to play with it, and it became a very musical thing that I could bounce off. uh, uh, I don't know. It's almost indescribable. I'm efforting to describe it, but I created a symphony of experience inside my own being, like so profound and quite joyful and full of life, and it was a wow. And then the next day came along, and I was actually very, very depressed. because I knew that everything I had experienced was not mine, that it was stimulated by that drug experience, and that I would have to spend the rest of my life learning what I learned in that, episode. I also never again needed to use that substance. I was completely done with it forever. It holds no attraction. It was like the medicine that it had for me was done. I got it. So and then I went straight the next day to talk to my meditation teacher about it, and luckily he was cool and supportive, and I just kept on with the practice and taking kind of a higher road rather than I don't know that that was a low road, but not to say that was the end of experimenting with psychedelics and the inner experience, but that was a big one.
Uh-huh. And so, like, can you just describe, there's so many different types of meditation techniques out there. So, like, were you taught any type of a technique of meditation? Like, sometimes you have to focus on a wall, sometimes you have to work with candles. The sometimes you do like the pranayama type of thing. Sometimes we do the anapana thing, which is a little bit different from pranayama. So, what kind of practice was it?
So Shamdhyan means meditation on space. And so it's learning
Mhm,
to recognize the space between thoughts, the space between breaths, the space between waves of emotion. And so always looking for the space. As an artist is very
mhm,
aware of negative space. It's that, so in a way it can be very difficult, but at the same time, any attention that you give to those spaces reveals the nature of it, and it's as if it grows it. So I would always find life in the space. And then by giving it my attention, again, the volition of your own attention, then it would expand. And so the amount of time that I could spend in that place of attending the space grew over time. Also, I mentioned the use of mantras. So my teacher at the time was a songwriter, and he would write a number of songs to his own Hindi poetry, and his students would actually write a bunch of music to his Hindi poetry. And then I learned to pick up verses from the Bhagavad Gita or Patanjali Yoga Sutras, and repeat them as a way to quiet the mind, give the mind something to do while I was attending
mhm,
the
mhm,
space. And I did actually very much come away from that process of mantras because it can be very mind numbing, and that's exactly what you don't want. Right, and becomes an act of willpower to try to quash the thoughts, to still them, to you know but my teacher actually gave really good advice on that, because he said you can stop a jet airplane midstream, but you cannot stop the thinking of a human being. Just to show
mhm,
how built in, how hardwired that thinking is. But it does become a kind of war on thinking, because the space is elevated to be high and lofty and divine and full of God, and the thinking is this lowly human thing, right? Human wasn't a compliment in that arena. Everything from the neck down was low class. Everything from the neck up was high class. And this creates a divide and a war inside yourself, because in reality, and that's how I got so sick with cancer, while I was meditating and meditating and meditating. But really, all that was doing was causing me to suppress all of the human aspect, all of my body, all of my feelings, all of my thoughts. And so
mhm,
while I had this deep, profound experience of the divine and many high, blissful inner experiences, it was in stark contrast to everything that I had made unconscious in my body and my heart and my mind. And so it was like a war inside myself, and the war resolved with a stage 4 lymphoma, being diagnosed after almost 10 years of working with my family.
At what age?
What age was I diagnosed? At 29.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, and like, were you somewhat aware that you might have had something, or before it was diagnosed?
Oh, yes, I had the signs of being miserable in the work that I was doing, of needing a great deal of caffeine to get through extremely high demands, really punishing hours that I would keep, minimum of 8 hours, but often 10 or 12 hours a day. One time I did a project managing an event and I worked 48 hours in a row with only eating and shower to take breaks, no sleep at all. And so that nickel and dimed me out of my life force. It nickel and dimed me out of any sense of happiness in that work. I began to feel desperate to get out of it, but I didn't see a way out of it because I had a real mission in my life to help my parents with their business after things fell apart to a great degree in the 90s during that recession. And so I had committed myself and I was going to do it at all costs. And it turned out to be the highest cost I could have imagined.
Um, this is because I don't want to skip on your experience coming to Kulu, because you came to Kulu after university, or right, and then
Right.
you came to Nepal, and then Kulu, and then this happened when you were 29, correct?
Yeah, so I went to India 8 times, so eight years in a row. I made a trip. The first time I was there for 11 months, and then I began to work with my family's firm after that first trip. So the trips after were only 6 weeks each for the following years. So I was leading that double life, doing the trips to India, doing meditation, um, hosting workshops, hosting classes, hosting teachers from around the world, doing a lot of music and concerts. I wrote a ton of contemplative music that I still have on CD, and so this double life became the thing that was the beginning of the end. It was, probably, sadly, if I wasn't so into the spiritual side of things, maybe I would have had the reserve energy I needed to survive that career. But really wasn't meant for me to stay in that world as a vice president, wearing suits and telling people what to do and working myself to the bone for no good purpose at all.
Tell us a little bit more about this experience coming to India. And initially, it was for 11 months. That's pretty decent amount of time. And how did you get in contact with this guru? Like, how did you find out about? Like, I know you read about what this guru wrote, right? About the ice melting thing. So, but how did you find that material?
Yeah, so the fellow that I took the university course in meditation with lived there in India with him, right in the same in the
Uh
same
huh.
city, Kulu there. So he was there, and that's how I got connected. I asked permission to come and visit, and I was accepted into the club. Turned out to be not a great club in the end, and yeah,
Yes.
mhm. I would
No,
live
I
in.
mean, like, it's a dime a dozen type of thing here in India and Nepal, where people kind of present themselves, as you probably found out later on. But would you like to share about that experience a little bit, and or would you like to kind of um, gloss it over?
No,
I'm
no,
okay with whichever direction that you want to take it, because
no, I'm happy to share. I never get asked these questions, so it's really fun for me. Um, it was a very interesting cult also. There was maximum about 250 people there at any one time, so it wasn't like some of those gurus that attract thousands and thousands and thousands of people. He had a small following, about maximum 800 people across the world, and only about 250 there at any one time. So it was actually quite manageable in the respect of of people being able to relate to each other. And it didn't have a lot of administration like some of those followings end up with layers, and that those layers would keep you away from the actual guru. So we could have a lot of contact, we could sit in front of him every single day. He would host satsang at one time or another. There was no schedule of any kind. It was, you literally left to your not your imagination, your intuition, to
Uh,
feel when he
Beth, are
was.
you there?
Oh yeah, can you hear me? Hello, hello.
Can you hear me, Beth? Am
Yes,
I audible?
yes, you are. Can you hear me?
Hello? Okay, you're back. I
Okay,
lost you for a bit. The
okay.
last thing I heard was that every day your guru was hosting satsang, correct?
Right, exactly. So yeah, we would go and sit in front of him, and he would give some teachings, and we would. It was mostly him talking, and then also people would get up and ask questions, and I was pretty brave. I would also put my hand up and go up there and put myself on sometimes what was a chopping block that he would give. Somewhat harsh teachings, and that's very classic for gurus to be those have their axe and just cut off your head, which can be very good because you get really strong reflections of where you're at. You get strong reflections of your own uh, you know egoic projection. I don't even talk like that very much, but what you're putting out. I remember telling him about an accident that I had been in on the highway, and I was trying to meditate my way through driving in very dangerous circumstances. And I was doing mantra to what I know now to be suppress the fear that I was having, because I really needed to just pull over and stop driving through the storm. But instead I kept on, and I was using the mantra, and then next thing you know, my car started to spin out of control, and I did a 360 on the highway, and I jumped out, and I saw there was a truck coming for me. Luckily the truck was able to stop in time, and I jumped into that truck for safety, and he brought me to Winnipeg, which is a miracle that he wasn't like a psycho or anything like that. So I was telling the Swami this story, and I was looking for the deep spiritual meaning in it. And I was just remembering this the other day, and he said to me, Beth, you lacked wisdom, like this. And it was this boom, like there was nothing, nothing esoteric and unraveling meaning. It was just you lacked wisdom. And it was an amazing lifelong lesson for me to when I get in over my head, not just try to spiritual technique my way out of it. Right. I wasn't done learning that lesson, unfortunately, because as you know, I got sick, and that's exactly what I was trying to do. But I've been working on that one. So yeah, I actually got a lot of good, despite the fact that that guru, like you were saying, dime a dozen, and most of them, from my experience and the hearsay and the way people talk about it, most of them are corrupt at some level. So my guru was no exception. He had power and control over people. He had a lot of money from them because we all paid to be there, tuition in that world. And it turned out he had a thing for young girls, and in fact, all the girls were his gopis. You might know that term, where they followed him around, and there was a lot of
Yes, yes.
yeah, and a lot of romance behind the scenes that luckily I was never drawn into or accepted into. I didn't know what was going on. Of course, everybody was lusting to be closer to him one way or another. If you got to talk to him personally or one on one, it was like this big status symbol. So I was trying to be more in the inner circle, but he didn't accept me in the inner circle, which was fantastic because in the inner
Yeah,
circles where
you lucked out there,
I
for
lucked
sure.
out, God was looking out for me. Exactly. So I was unharmed by the situation, but many other people were harmed, including two children that he was abusing sexually. So I managed to again get out. So I got out of that weird spiritual situation and my work life with the stage 4 lymphoma. I don't recommend my methods.
Okay, so l- he eventually did get caught, didn't he? And he went to jail.
No, he never did. He was outed by several of his students who came forward one after the other with their stories, including the two children. And his face landed on the front page of the lifestyle section of the Globe and Mail on Saturday, which is no small audience, especially back in those days when the newspapers were the only source of news, or one of the only sources of news. But all of that outing didn't stop the movement. About half the people vacated, but half stayed with him. And they would find all kinds of spiritual reasons why, oh, those children needed to go through that experience for their spiritual evolution, and it was meant to be. And the Swami's just acting from the will of God, and all of this bull crap, right? So it was a
Yeah.
clear divide. Those that had discrimination didn't look back, turned away, did their own thing. And then I believe to this day there's probably still a community there. Now he passed away. Swami Sham died at the age of 71 or 72, but I think his people still are congregating there.
He was already fairly like he was older than you when you first initially met him. Like the first time you met him was what, in the 90s? Is that the case?
Yeah, so it was the better part of 10 years, so he would have been in his 60s when I met him.
Because I did kind of, I remember you telling this story, and so I did a little bit of investigating, and like a friend of mine, a Ukrainian guy, and he's been in India for some time, and he knows a lot of people. So he also kind of asked around, and we kind of honed in on one individual, and he apparently, of course, like you mentioned, had gopis and had relationship with a lot of different women. And there was one relationship that he had with a English lady whom he ended up impregnating, and she gave birth to a child and left him here in Kulu Valley. She herself, ran away from the whole thing and went back to England. He grew up and was adopted to a village in Vashisht, about 20 minutes from where I am. And he ended up marrying another friend of mine who is from New York, this Jewish lady. They adopted like three kids. They had two kids of their own. They have five kids together. But he is the result of this guru whom you're talking about. We're fairly sure that is the case, and his mother is from England. He's about my age, actually. Around, I think he's like, I'm 45 now. I think he's like 47 ish, maybe 46. So he's around my age, and he doesn't remember about his childhood other than the fact that he was adopted to this village and being raised by other Indians. And then when he was 20 years old, I mean, he knows of his English mother's past. Of course, he never got to meet her. He was just kind of left here. But yeah, so and then there was another lady who was involved, who was kind of involved with that guru as well. So he had a bit of an influence in Kulu Valley, which is where I am at, in northern part of India, in the state of Himachal Pradesh. So it's a small world after all.
I know, amazing. So he actually had five children, five adult children that were there the whole time. So they were part of the movement. I know his oldest son, and they were all born of an Indian mother. So I don't know, of course, about any of the other, um, who he got pregnant that you're talking about right now. But I know that the eldest had a lot of psychological problems, and he would. There were times when he would completely lose it. I believe he saw his father's corruption and would try to be a whistleblower, and then they would suppress him and they would drug him. And he also, now they would always say, oh, he's a Kundalini case. So he did too many breath exercises, and he got too much energy flowing. And the next thing you know, he's running naked down the street. And, so he was always looked at as a kind of case, but that it was his own problem. And then more, later on, when people were coming forward with their story, they were saying that he had been, what was his name again? I can't remember offhand, but that he had awakened to his dad's true nature, and they did everything possible to make sure he didn't get out with that story.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we can probably spend many hours talking about cults and cult leaders and the psychology thereof, but I want to kind of go back to this is about you and your journey. So let's continue on. So you spent initially 11 months, and then you came back to Canada, and later on you found out that you had cancer. So let's go from there. How did you deal with that situation? What happened during that time?
Well, it was sadly my ticket out. So I had been praying to God for a way not to continue in that work that I felt really trapped in. And when I got the diagnosis, I had been at my surgeon's for an appointment. I'd had a biopsy of a lump that I had in my neck, and I was very sure that I was going to find out there were no results whatsoever, that I was just being a hypochondriac, and I was going to go back to work. I had lots of signs and symptoms, but I thought, oh, maybe I'm inventing all of this as a way to just be a Debbie Downer, complainer, quitter, all of that kind of stuff. So lo and behold, I went to the surgeon's office. He told me that I had a stage 4 lymphoma. It was another board in the face, like holy crap. And then driving home like a zombie, or driving back like a zombie, my car didn't go to the office. It went to the river, and I just sat by the river, and it was the last time I ever set foot. And leaving the office that day was the last time I had ever been in that space, never to return, not even to get my things. I gave myself permission at that point to quit my work with my family, and I thought, okay, this is big enough now. I have cancer. I can justify to my father in particular why I'm not going to be working there anymore. He wasn't happy. He thought that not working was a sign of me, like committing suicide, because in his eyes, work was your purpose. And if you didn't work, you didn't have purpose and you had nothing to live for. So that was a lot of tension
Yeah,
there. But I knew inside myself that I needed to do, or I really needed to do nothing but heal. And so I took that on as a full-time job. I tried very hard to avoid all of the medical system that I had a great deal of fear and disdain for by that point. I knew too much. I had been studying natural health and herbalism and Ayurveda in India, and of course the meditation and all that I really believed in. And so I took it into my own hands. I started working with a few different naturopaths. Over the course of 3 years, I ended up moving to Vancouver to work with a specialist naturopath who had a lot of experience in cancer. And I did a lot of treatments with him that at the beginning seemed very positive, and I was gaining health. And then the second half of it was all downhill. I was losing my life force. I was not gaining ground anymore. And it was actually the naturopaths that said, Beth, go home and do chemotherapy, or he thought radiation, because the type of lymphoma that I had is curable by those means. I was just trying everything possible to not use them. And so it was him. It was on. No one else could have told me to do that, but him. I trusted. And so I went back. It turned out I didn't qualify at all for radiation, and they started preparing me for chemotherapy, which went on for the better part of 11 months, which was very intense. The better your health is, the more chemo they give you, which is a weird thing because if you're very, very, very sick, they can only give you smaller amounts of chemotherapy. But if you're not that sick, which I wasn't on my deathbed, I still had all my faculties. I could walk, I could drive a car. I wasn't well, but I also wasn't on my deathbed. And so after 11 months of chemotherapy, I was on my deathbed. It nearly killed me. I had what I consider to be a near death experience. And yeah, it was a real showstopper. Lost all my faculties. I lost my hair. Eventually, lost my ability to walk around. My hands had such very severe reactions to the drugs. They were all swollen up and useless to me. I had to sell my house and move in with my parents. They looked after me. And then there was a moment, a day came where I no longer could get out of bed. I could no longer sit up. I had lost everything. And I went into what I thought was going to be death.
Wow. Yeah, so you were right at the precipice of life right there. So, tell us more about, how you were able to, step away from that.
Yeah, so as you can tell, I survived. And I, it
Yes,
was,
we're all happy for it.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just so you know, the story ends good, but it was the first time I had recognized how desperately I had been suppressing my fear of dying and using a lot of rah and go team and positive thinking and all the meditation and the spiritual study and the singing and the mantras and just always trying to keep a high space and a high state. But I realized at this point that I had been hanging on to the high state by my fingernails, and that sea of blackness, that sea of death was all there underneath. And I decided, okay, I'm not hanging on anymore. I can't hang on anymore. I fell into the sea of blackness, the sea of what I thought to be death, gave over and completely gave myself to that. Said, okay, you can have me, death, I'm yours. And I went through the blackness in, I'm sure, less than a minute. I had an enormous breakthrough that I wasn't dead, I wasn't even dying. In fact, it was the opposite experience. I was full of life, full of joy, full of immense satisfaction and fullness. And my first conclusion with that was that I never again needed to do anything to get fulfilled, because that's what I had been doing my whole life. Whatever it was, I was trying to fill up this empty vessel that I believed, based on indoctrination, that I didn't have what I needed. I needed to go and get that. And so that was very big. I also downloaded what I consider to be my life purpose, all in code, of course. Nothing I could even give words to, not a single word, but I knew I was downloading a very distinct purpose. And I saw how if I was to die in that moment, that I didn't get out of my purpose. The death was not an escape, that I would just have to come back and do it all over again and continue on my mission. I also saw how my mission was not an isolated entity, that without the people that are the lock and key fit with my purpose, people I would serve, people who would serve me and be instrumental in the creation of life around me, that there's that the meaning of that is that there's no purpose in isolation. So I saw that I had my people. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know anything about them, but I knew they were there. And so those were the main revelations that I came uh, back with from that experience. I came to, I felt a lot more life in my body. I was pretty sure the cancer was gone. And within a couple of days, I requested to be tested, and it actually confirmed that I was in remission.
Wow. It's a miracle, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it still makes me cry. I'm doing my audiobook of the book that I wrote about this called Journey. And I was reading the chapter where I illustrate that experience, which was very difficult, let me tell you, very difficult to be able to speak that onto words on a page, and then to give voice to it with the audiobook. I had to stop every single line to cry. And it's not because I'm still traumatized by that. It's just that it's a very sad story, a very deep, moving story. So I still make myself cry with that.
Well, I mean, I think people will be interested to know, about your personal experience. Like, if you had like a near-death experience or something like this, would you like to share share that with us? Like, if you had any kind of an experience like that?
There was nothing of those traditional, seeing the light and going into the tunnel and the flashback of memories, other than the awareness again of that me being a dying person at that point was trying to escape, right? And I thought that very unconsciously, I had no idea I was thinking like this, but I thought death was a way out. And so it just was that, to me, the big, people get those life reviews, but to me, the life review, if you call it that, was there's no way out. And that's actually the good news, that that you can't get out, because all of the goodness is in, and there is no out. That's a big illusion that there's some out, because we live in a state of oneness, interconnectedness, through time, through space, no beginning, no end, right? There's no out. So that was it. But within 18 months after being in remission, I still could not completely recover from all of the chemotherapy, all the injury that I had been through. Still couldn't walk down an entire block, for example. I didn't get my strength back, or digestion was such a mess for so long. And then I was starting to have signs of cancer again. And I knew the difference between being sick with cancer and being sick with the chemotherapy and the drugs. And I was having those feelings again inside myself. I went for a number of tests. They didn't show anything. And then finally it did show. And they said that, so I was diagnosed again for the second time. They said that second diagnosis, I was headed for death, that nobody survives the second diagnosis. Their recommendation was that I get a stem cell transplant, which, if you have any idea what that's like, they basically kill you almost to the end with chemotherapy drugs. And then they harvest your stem cells that wildly produce all of a sudden in your bone marrow, because your body's trying a last ditch effort to survive. And then they give the stem cells back to you as the cure. This is I learned to see this as a satanic ritual, the blood ritual, like very awful, severe. People are put in isolation. They have no contact with people for an entire year. For those that do recover, it takes them an entire year to get to zero again. And I have a brother-in-law who died that way, exactly with a stem cell transplant. I was able to see him go through that violence. And so it brought me to a point of, I thought I already faced my death big time, but it was a new layer, a new level. And I was called at that time to begin studying the archetypes that Carolyn Miss had published that year, a book called Sacred Contracts, which I do recommend, even though she's not awake at all right now. I've followed her a little bit in the past years. And that book held some really important keys for me to begin looking. The big question is, okay, why am I a dying person when I'm doing everything possible that would be good to survive, right? The good natural medicine, good natural food. I was juicing like crazy, still meditating, still having a very strong relationship with God. I was just doing everything possible, doing all kinds of therapies and treatments, and you name it, I was doing it. And there I was dying again. And so it pushed me to another brink of death, to see another layer of the fear of dying, and how I was allowing that fear to be the impetus for everything that I was doing for myself. And so it was at that point I was able to turn it around and turn that motive of fear, to let the motive of fear go and let the motive of love that is naturally there to reveal itself. And I discovered that one archetype in particular was so grossly out of alignment for me. I bet you can guess which one it was.
Um, well, let's see. Is that the archetype stuff? I'm not 100% sure.
That's okay. Yeah, so it was, I discovered that that rebel archetype had been so severely suppressed, right? That's why
I
I,
see.
yeah, that I let go of all of my rebel sense, and I pushed it down because I had been a rebel without a cause. It seemed like it was such a big problem for me. Everybody told me it was a big problem for me. The parents, my sisters, the police, everybody was like, Beth, you got to straighten out. And so all I did was suppress a really important part of myself. When I finally saw in those days after the second diagnosis how powerfully I was using all my life force to suppress this important rebel part of myself, the moment of seeing it, I was able to begin unsuppressing it. And in unsuppressing it, the life force began to come back immediately into my system. And again,
Hmm.
that realization that the motive of fear brings and pulls in what you fear, and the motive of love, it pulls what you love. And so those two huge keys for me had me go from being a dying person to a living person practically overnight.
So, so it began. So, like, you were able to completely heal from the cancer after the second time. Like, you come to this realization about the suppression of the rebel archetype, and you have this rebel gene, or I don't know,
Mhm.
it's a character or a personality that you've been kind of not acknowledging. Is that what was happening? You weren't really acknowledging yourself of your true nature, and then when you have come to some acceptance of yourself, is that when things started to turn around?
Yes,
How is
exactly.
it
So
working?
yeah, so there's two mechanics that people are generally unaware of. And there's actions. So we have a constant generation of our inner experience going on, and it can be mapped with archetypes that are extremely consistent in their patterns. And you can see an archetype that is in an awakened place is full of gifts that are going to facilitate your mission on earth, and then the suppressed um, version of the archetype is going to act like your enemy, like it's trying to kill you. There I was, a dying person. And so when you learn to distinguish, and this goes um, sometimes deeper than people go with meditation, because I was never taught this. I realized it for myself. The difference between suppressing an inner experience and unsuppressing an inner experience. You use the word acceptance is a very big gatepost on the way to unsuppressing. Once you accept something about yourself, you're no longer with such uh, strength, pushing all of your using all of your power to push something away from your awareness. And so the acceptance is the first step, but the full release of it is a new decision to allow energy that has been trapped and stuck in that unconscious pattern of suppression to be unsuppressed and to release, and to go from being held energy that acts like an enemy to being free energy that acts like God.
Okay. So, so with that in mind, ultimately, you got to a point where you got the energy to be able to heal yourself, right?
Well,
Um,
this is exactly it, Nachiketa, that it because I often have said after that that I don't know how to heal of cancer, but life energy does. And when I was able to return that energy literally just by not suppressing anymore, then that energy came back into my system. It became free energy and it knew how to heal to the next level. And I never had to look back. I never again felt, that there, knowing the feeling, knowing the sensation of cancer in my body. I think there were times that I have touched down into it, but I've become much more sensitive and catching any signs or symptoms early on so they're easy and manageable to deal with. I did eventually divorce my oncologist and decided never again to go, unless God tells me really big time to go and get tested. I'm probably never going to take part in diagnostic medicine again because I know that there's all kinds of things that happen wrong once you're in the vortex of their system. So I was in the hospital one more time. I ended up getting shingles while I was still recovering my immune system, if you call it that. Now we all look at that kind of different, but and it was very serious. It was actually really severe. So I took myself to the hospital or to the doctor. They threw me in the hospital, said like you're not even allowed to go home. They said your cancer's come back. This is a very bad sign. They put me on all kinds of antivirals and isolation, like just this really severe response. And my it was my homeopath that actually broke me out of the hospital. I had to sign my life away that I was taking responsibility for myself and got myself off of all of those drugs really quickly. And yeah, I just decided, okay, that's it. I'm never putting myself in their hands again because what else are they going to do? All they know is fear and drugging. So I I almost have never been to a doctor just for the odd little thing that and they're mad at me because I don't go there anymore. They don't like me.
yeah. So, like, how long did the whole process took, like, for you to fully recover from your near death with cancer? I mean, you had like stage 4. I mean, I mean, that's getting there, right? I mean, it doesn't get more severe than that, really, right?
Right. Yeah, it was a 3-year process by the time it was all behind me.
And what happened after that? So you're in your early 30s now. So it began at 29 when you found out about cancer, and I mean, 3 years of struggling. I mean, that's a long time. And so you're what, 32, 33, after it was completely done and over with. And then what happened? What happened afterwards?
Well, I knew for sure I wasn't going to go back into business with my family because that decision that one got made the hard way, but nonetheless it was made. And I also knew I wasn't going to get a job. And I luckily had excellent health insurance. It was one of the benefits of having had that corporate life job. So I was financially taken care of. And then all of a sudden it was like, I'm well. I'm not going to be able to convince anybody that I'm not well. And I knew psychologically if I tried to hang on to that financial support, that I would probably make myself unwell to, avoid the hard work and responsibility that I could feel was coming. And so I just one little step at a time got myself out into the world. I began to teach meditation. I saw how yoga was just beginning to get some popularity in it was before the days of having a yoga studio on every single corner, which is I think now diminishing as well. But so I started to teach yoga and meditation. I started doing workshops on the archetypes because I had seen by that time how powerful it was for me to work with them. So, guiding people in that. I got out with my music to a great extent. I recorded a new CD. I had only had one recording that I did in India from 1999, just before everything fell apart there. So, I recorded my new CD, Where There's Beauty, which is a very powerful very evocative, very emotional body of work that reflected my experiences, what I had been through, and I just went on my way like a hippie chick, going to teach classes all over the place, and then in 2006 I got pregnant with my son, and so that hippie chick lifestyle was over, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to sustain that with a baby. So I started to up level myself and train in a new style of business that all my corporate life really applied to mass marketing, and not the level of promotion that I wanted to do myself. And I reclaimed my interest in business because it was never business that I hated. It was the corporate world that was so out of alignment with me. So I trained myself as a business coach, and I trained myself as a money coach, and I also trained in a modality that is connected with a man whose name is Lester Levinson. So another kind of guru, although he was passed by the time I got involved with that work. But I made a number of trips to go and study with his students, and to this day still use and embody that work, and have developed that work into my own trainings where I'm training coaches, and so yeah, that became my way of life, very slowly evolving my business and working with clients from all over the world, using the archetypes as the um, really the cultural bridge, because if they're there in France or Germany or Hungary or wherever their location is, even in the US, we've got all kinds of cultural differences across Canada. And so the archetypes became a common language that I used to help to have people know themselves, that we could speak the same language, and then helping them to ultimately deprogram the archetypes so that they could, instead of be unconsciously moved by fear, they could be more consciously driven by love.
Um, I don't mean to pry, but obviously you were in a relationship with somebody in order to have your son. Is the father still a part of the scene? Would you like to talk about that a little bit? I mean, like maybe some people might want to know what's going on there, and like anything that you want to share or don't want to share. I don't have any issues with it. Just out of curiosity, I do apologize.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, I met my son's dad between diagnoses, actually. I had met him and we started to date. So he was in the picture at that point. After all the treatments, my oncologist told me that I was likely never to have children because of all of those drugs do cause infertility. That was a big shocker to me. I was pretty disappointed that they didn't tell me that before. There was no choice in it. But nonetheless, on the other side of healing from cancer, all of a sudden, I wanted to have a baby. It just came through me that I never thought, and there I was, um, how old would I have been when I got pregnant? I was 39 when I had him, so I wasn't pregnant until I was 38, and and so and this is a little bit personal. I'm assuming that my son's dad will never hear this because he doesn't really tap in with my work at all, or tune in with my work at all. But I said to him, "Hey, I want to have a baby." He's like, "Yeah, let's do it." I'm like, "Really?" I didn't even expect him to want that, and then so he said he did. I was pregnant in about 5 minutes of having had that intention. I was actually extremely aware of Liam's soul hovering around me, and then it was the end of that relationship, unfortunately, because turns out my ex was saying that because he believed I would never get pregnant. So he was betting on the doctors being right. That wasn't the case. So my son came anyway. And so I was a single parent for a number of years, but it wasn't long before his dad got involved and was showing up and being a dad and helping me as well, which was good. Everybody had to help me in that time because a self-employed person doesn't have anything to fall back on in Canada. I think that it's changed now. There is some kind of maternity leave for self-employed people, but there wasn't then. My grandmother paid my rent, and just a lot of different things happened until I was able to get back to work in about 4 months of doing that. I'm proud to say my son was never in a daycare. Between his dad and myself, we were able to meet all of his needs when he was a young baby. And so, yeah, the dad is very involved in my son's life. And we're actually pretty decent friends now.
That's good news. And, souls have a way of choosing parents, some might say. And, I think your son obviously chose you to experience this life with. Things happen. And it's a bit of a miracle in its own right for you to have a child when you wanted to have a child, though, too, when the cards were stacked against you.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It was he just was meant to be. Oh, and it was really interesting because I had as long as I'm sharing all my private details here, I had a very severe insomnia at that point, and I couldn't for the life of me sleep. So it was. I turned to the medical system this time through my family because they have access to all of the drugs, of course. So I got myself on this medication, and it was better on the medication than being completely sleepless. And then when I was seeing a homeopath, and when she heard I was on that drug, she ordered me to get off. She was very bossy bull, but it was amazing because it was so soon after she got me off that drug, I was pregnant in no time. And had I got pregnant on that drug, chances are it would have been not a viable pregnancy. So it was really,
Yeah.
yeah, I consider my son to be a total miracle in the timing.
Yeah, amazing. Just to continue on with the story, you taught yourself how to be a business lady, and you went through the coaching, and I don't know a whole lot about this Lester Levinson guy, but you were following him, his teachings, whatever that he was teaching. Um, Maybe you would like to share a little bit more about that, about what it is that you've learned and how it is applied to what you're doing now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Lester, like I said, I didn't meet him, but I learned a lot about him. There were recordings of him speaking and some video, and quite a community had been created or had been growing around his work. So he was originally from New York City, and he was a genius. We don't know how he got to be a genius, but to me, genius always speaks to some kind of trauma. Actually, anyway. That's a bit of different story. But he was a high roller. He had a lot of wins, a lot of losses. He was an entrepreneur, pioneer. Started a lot of businesses. A lot of businesses failed. He was, had relationships. The relationship would fail. So a lot of big wins, big losses. And next thing you know, he had a double heart attack. And his doctor said, "You're not going to live through this. Go home, get your affairs in order. It's over for you." So he went home, but with his extremely advanced intellect, he thought, maybe they are not correct. And he had the idea that if he was to let go of all of his inner experiences that were not love. Oh, he has a website. That's funny. I didn't even know. If you go to if you go to Wikipedia, it'll tell you that it's just advertising. What's behind him? They whatever. That's how they recorded it. And one of his students is an intense marketer, so I can see how they got that impression. And then so he systematically let go of everything inside of his awareness that was not love. And he had the same experience as me, a complete turnaround, went from dying to living, and lived until he was in his what around what year would it have been? I think it was
He
90.
passed in 1994, and he was born
Right.
in 1909. So that would make him like what, 85 years old when he passed.
Right, right. Yeah, good for you. You're a good researcher there. Yeah, exactly. So 1994 was the year that he passed, and then some of his students went on to continue his work. He was at the beginning of his awakening. He had from his own reports, he had pretty supernatural powers. All kinds of things could happen easily for him. He could demonstrate, like there was one of the things that he did one time was to leave the house in New York, and it was cold and he wanted to go to the West Coast where it was warm in California. And he wanted to demonstrate that he could do that without a single dollar in his pocket. And so he walked out onto the road. Next thing you know, a guy came by and said, "Oh, Lester, I've been looking for you. I owe you some money. Here's the $300 that I borrowed last year." So, boom, he had $300. He went to the airport, he got a plane ticket. And then just one experience after the other of these kind of synchronistic things that many of us are aware of, how those kind of magical moments can happen. And he went and he had this great meeting with people, and it was very productive. And he demonstrated to himself and to others how, by releasing the suppressed emotions and programs, that you can have a great deal more control over your life than you would have ever believed. And so people would gather around him. He would start to host people for teaching and for listening to him speak and stuff like that. And they really got attached to him, and they would feel good around him. But he started seeing how useless it was because if they weren't around him, they just went back to being their old self, not never transformed, just elevated. And so, what he did then was to create a method and a system for people to be independent with the work. So, they didn't need to be physically with him, that they could do it themselves. And that's when he was able to discern some very discrete programs that operate in the unconscious. There are not very many of these programs. And when you learn to see the blueprint of those programs and how they're activated with your own life energy, you can make new decisions not to run those programs anymore. And so I had, as done meditation and all kinds of spiritual modalities and everything. But when I used this method for releasing, I was able to grow in leaps and bounds in the energetic reclamation. So it's stuff that I was already doing, especially to save my life from cancer, but I hadn't discerned these specific programs. And so I got very interested in that and did a lot of trainings, a lot of trips, a lot of courses. And then finally, there was one group out of New York that had offered a certification training, so you could become a teacher of this method. And I jumped at that, so I went and did that, and very quickly got certified with them. And then they found a way to demonize and reject me, so I went off on my own. That world can be extremely proprietary with Lester's work, which is to me the exact opposite. Lester believed that if 10% of the population could learn how to release the not love and the programs that hold that not love in place, that it would absolutely transform the world. So I still hold on to that, and doing his work, I've adapted a lot of things to try to translate to people how to integrate knowledge about themselves. The self-awareness through the archetypes is priceless, because you get to see exactly, you're stuck. Your life is showing you're stuck for one reason or another, or many reasons or others. And but once you find out where precisely you are stuck, right? That's what saved my life. Seeing through, oh, it's the rebel. And I also had a big nurture thing that's a little bit of a different story. The nurture was definitely factored in, but it was mainly the rebel archetype. that I had invested and tied up so much suppressed energy that it was costing me my life. So by being able to see that, then I could go to work exactly there, releasing that held energy. And so the combination of Lester's work, adaptations that I've made on that, discoveries along the way, with all of the um, archetype work, now I am training coaches. And I'm in my, in fact, yesterday we just graduated the fifth class in 4 years of what I call journey code coaches that are helping people
Yeah,
to do
that's
program.
yeah, that's amazing. And if is there any one particular material about Lester Levinson that you recommend to the public here?
In terms of written work or anything like that, you could likely find on YouTube. I'm assuming there was his recordings of him speaking are there, and they're quite enjoyable. You know, you're listening to somebody. Was he 100% awake? Was he the awakened Buddha or Jesus? Some people would say yes. Other people have stories about him that reveal it wasn't the case. And I don't think he was like, intensely corrupted the same way as my Swami in India, but he wasn't perfect. And so I while I did listen to him a lot, I really was careful not to turn him into just my next guru to follow and to pray to and, get into a very inappropriate relationship with. I do have a great deal of gratitude for the pioneer work that he did, but don't follow him so much. He does have books out there, and some of his students, if you, for example, what is Hale Dewaskin's name? He wrote the Sedona Method, and that's based on Lester's work. He was a student of Lester's. There's still a company called the Release Technique, which are the much more aggressive business owners. The company owner Larry Crane died, but his sons kept on doing those seminars and that kind of thing. And I'm pretty sure just because of the money that it was one of the very few things before our spiritual new age culture took off. It was one of very few things that people could do. So there was a lot. It was very easy to convince people to take part in that, and a lot of good was done. But there's also been really good evolution in that work that has made it more effective. Partly was other parts of my trainings, and again, innovations that I've made myself. So what would I recommend? Yeah, they can search around on YouTube. I think there was one audio that was hours and hours and hours. I think it was like 8 hours of him speaking different talks. And thanks, Corinne. That's very sweet of you. Um, yeah, he does have books, but he never does talk about the programs in the books. That's the interesting part. That's more been passed down, and they've been treated to be proprietary. But I know for a fact that Lester didn't want to keep this a secret and under behind a paywall for everybody. Although I charge for my work as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody will argue against that, but I kind of would like to know a little bit more about where this schism or disagreement came from, because like you went to New York. Did you actually physically went to New York to go to New York to get a license? Like, how does it work? And then where did this disagreement or demonizing and being rejected? How did that all come about? Like, I think it would be important for you to at least share your perspective on what happened there, so that other people can understand it in case they might come across that a situation themselves.
Right. So yeah, the it was never a licensing process, but it was a certifying process. So I became one of their teachers and one of their um, coaches as well. And yes, a great deal in person. There was trainings in New York, and then a lot of trainings in Sedona. There was a piece of land and retreat center that was owned by Lester at a time. There was some land dispute, and he lost it, but they still go there and use that location as a kind of magical location. So I was extremely devoted to that organization called the Center for Releasing that doesn't exist now. It was, I think it lasted maybe 3 or 4 years. And I did a lot of work for them, a lot of work for free. I was helping them as a business coach to get them to launch their trainings to a wider audience. They were mostly uncoachable and they didn't want to listen to me. Uh, and I'm familiar now with you will never see me out there on the sidewalk going like, come do my modality. My modality is the best modality. And that's what a lot of those people make the mistake of doing. And they were making the mistake of doing that. And it was like, okay, well, all this time and energy is going to waste because it's not that nobody wants a new modality, and especially in a spiritual world that is so incredibly saturated with that. But I continued on, and I think there was some kind of jealousy or something. They started being suspicious of me. I got accused of doing drugs at a retreat, and I totally didn't. Um, I, I like honestly don't. I don't. There was some kind of inner thing that there was one time I found out they had all had a meeting about me, and like I was just seen as a badass. And it's funny because I wasn't even being a badass at all, but I think there was some either jealousy or threat or something because I was extremely ambitious and I wanted this work to get out there, and they weren't able to take my direction. So they went looking in my past on my Facebook. Now everyone's going to go to my Facebook, and there's a picture of me. I was part of an art event where I was painted as a mermaid, and it was all body painting, and I was half nude, not in the pictures, but so you could tell that I was half nude in this photo, but with my back turned to the photo, just showing the art that had been painted on me, and that was a bucket list thing. I'll never need to do that again, but that was fun. We had a very beautiful art experience, and then so they found this photo, and they decided that I was immoral and not a good what do you call it example of their organization. So I was to take that photo down, and I don't know what else they wanted me to do, but to me it was just the straw that broke the camel's back. They were for some reason afraid of me or demonizing me. I really was doing nothing wrong, but I was ambitious. So I was pushed out of that community at that time, and I just went on my way. Just another, I don't know, is it another cult? But they really wanted to own everything. They were so afraid that someone would go and teach Lester's work. Well, and it wasn't until 2020 when I decided that, you know what, I'm going to risk it. I'm going to risk it because things are so bad in the world and people need to know how to deprogram. Oh, you sent them my Facebook link there. Yeah, you have to go way back in the pictures for that. And yeah, yeah, it's funny. So I just risked it, and there was a time when Larry Crane was still alive. He did threaten to sue me. He had zero grounds whatsoever, but they were all like kind of watchdogs. I think because of the money, they wanted to be in
Yeah.
control, right? And I knew also I had already read a few books where they brought up Lester's work, and Hale DeWaskin had published about his work, and I just thought, you know what, take to the streets and risk that they're going to somehow try to take you down or out, and they haven't. In 4 years nobody's said anything to me whatsoever, and I really have adapted the work and made it my own, and put in a great deal of time and energy on how to make this available to people. It's not easy work, and there are people that can't do it. People that maybe have put a lot of time and energy into meditation, all kinds of spiritual exercises, but releasing is an act of bravery because you're going through the hardest experiences you could ever possibly imagine. And
Well,
yeah.
no, well, let's hope it stays that way, that they are going to leave you alone. But my guess, if I were to just speculate, is that they're probably jealous of you, and they were probably afraid of you. And, I think you have a kind of a shining brightness to yourself, and very charismatic. And, maybe they were afraid that you were going to be taking over their corporation or something, and they wanted to keep you under their control, but they knew that they couldn't control you either. You can't be controlled, Beth. You have that rebel, spirit in you, and you're gonna do what you're gonna do. So they probably recognize that, and then they're like, okay, well, let's only thing to do with her is to, gaslight her, demonize her, present her as an enemy, and take it from there. But that's just my guess.
Yeah, I think you're pretty accurate. And thank you. That's generous of you. Yeah.
So, let's continue with so how long have you been doing how long have you been like off on your own and like you said within 4 years you've done 5 classes or 5 sets of people or groups of people who have graduated from your method, and would you like to share a little bit about what you do and how you help people? How would you consider yourself? Are you a life coach? What is the right categorization or label for who you are? And yeah, just let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. It's become a real center point of my world. I created the House of Free Will in 2022 and took my trainings inside that private entity. And over the course of 7 months, it's no little training. This was actually how I saved myself from complete despair in 2020 when the all the shit hit the fan. I thought, okay, well, do I just lay here and cry? Because I could see by that point how the agenda was really rolling out. I'd woke myself up a few years, or maybe 5 years prior to that, and I thought it was over. I thought I just had to like do nothing but prep, and my work was over. My life was going to be over. And then I thought, well, I wonder if there's something I could do to be of service at this time and to also be forward moving at this time. And then, so here, just send you a message. And so then I heard, Beth, do your certification training, because it was something that I imagined I would always do. And I didn't know that it was going to be, or if it was going to be, in 10 years or maybe 20 years. I had it way off in my mind that I wasn't qualified yet, that I'm going to, I needed more experience and all of that kind of thing, even though I'd been coaching for many, many years by that point using these tools and techniques. But so I thought, okay, that's it. I'm gonna pick myself up off the floor. I'm getting myself out of despair. I tasked myself with creating a 7-month training. I immediately went out and got a group to be my beta trainers or trainees, and they joined. There are still people involved to this day that were in the very first training. And we went through, I created the program as we went, week by 24 weeks of modules, including the tools of deprogramming, the top ones, not all from Lester's work, some of the ones that I had used, like, for example, Tonglen was extremely powerful for me in my days when I was sick with cancer. And some of the somatic releasing, which is also sometimes the only way people can release from the body when they can't find programs. They're too subtle. They're not at that place where they can observe them yet. So there's 9 weeks devoted to that. And then there's 8 weeks devoted to the archetypes of the hero's journey, talking about the hero's journey as an archetype itself, how to use the archetypes as a map to find the places that you are suppressing important parts of yourself, which on the surface are personality, but at the depths represents soul's purpose. And so this is the underlying subject of all of the work that I'm doing. It's the punchline that with purpose, then that's freedom. That is the life force. And without purpose, then there's no freedom and there's diminished life force, if any at all. And so we go through the archetypes. I teach them how to coach with those archetypes, always by doing their own inner healing work, by receiving coaching, by coaching each other. And then the last 7 weeks of the training are all about the principles of good coaching, how to have good boundaries, how not to be a bull in a china shop. This is something I really credit my training in releasing with, is that you cannot ever, as a practitioner, break ground in somebody's unconscious. You can't go where they aren't going. Now, you can try, but it's going to bring up all kinds of resistance and have limited effects. The whole healing world starts to come into a different focus for me through the lens of that. How a healer will say, "Oh, can I work in you?" It's like, no, no, you can't. Can you stop pretending you're working in me and work on yourself? Or better yet, could you like disentangle yourself from any of my inner workings, even the belief that you're doing that? And so, how to learn to be there in assistance and not even guiding people into their unconscious, but making opportunities for them to see what they don't see, because that's the revelation. As soon as you see what you didn't see, you can make new decisions about what you see. And that is extremely life changing. All kinds of things can start to happen very fast. Relationships heal, the body can heal, your life path and your purpose can come into resolve in a totally different way. It can affect your finances. It's been an enormous boon for me to be able to release inner fear around money and abundance. And that so it is a beautiful thing. So yeah, I've now done 5 of these trainings in a row. The first one was the beta, and then every time I go through it, I am improving on the training. And we just finished the 2003 version of it. Now 2004 is going to start again at the end of September. So it's not too soon if anybody's hearing this and they have the idea that they would like to have.
2023 and 2024, right?
Okay, thank you. I missed the 20s there. Yeah, exactly. All of a sudden, I'm way back in my past, thanks to all your questions about the past. And yeah, so 2024 September is when the next training begins. And if you have any interest in having a livelihood, helping people, because this definitely is beaconing out to those helpers in the world that I find are extremely common in my life, and it's hard to help in a way that is not going to take you down and out. Because that's the nurturer archetype, also a very big reason why I got so sick. I was trying to help my parents, trying to help that business, trying to be the force of life that they didn't seem to have at that point after 30 years of being in business. And so teaching about how to be a helper with good, clean, solid boundaries, so you don't lose your life to helping others. You in fact gain purpose and gain your freedom while helping others. So that's my big mission with that training.
Okay. Well, I think everybody really appreciates that, and we need more people like yourself who can help others, who can to help themselves. Really, what it comes down to. I know we don't have a lot of time to spend with you, and I would like to try to utilize the time that we do have for you to just talk a little bit about spirituality, talk a little bit about demons, and maybe if you can share your thoughts on God or what you think about God, I think that would be very interesting, at least for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a subject that I spent a lot of time thinking about and speaking about. It has evolved and changed. So if you go back in my work, even I was listening to some of my older courses. By the way, Justin was talking about Primal Power alumni there. And so I was working on organizing that training as an online course right now. And so to me, the shift has been from the pursuit of ascension, the pursuit of enlightenment, the pursuit of the highest state of being, raising energy, raising frequency, to a breakthrough that I've had in the last couple of years, seeing that as a trap. And because whatever is high is also simultaneously low, as above, so below. You cannot muck with that natural law. That as you ascend, and go up whether it's a scale of emotion, the scale of archetypes, or any kind of frequency, trying to get higher and higher. I'm just looking at the sky and watching the birds. I used to do that a lot of like sky tracking kind of stuff, always trying to get high, but with the awareness that that's how I got sick with cancer, by elevating and vacating my bones, my flesh, everything that was, so-called low down. So now how I see, oh, thank you, shut up, and that's very nice. How I see the spiritual journey is that, yes, in fact, we must do some ascension work, right? If you're stuck in apathy and grief and fear, you're not going to find your sacred purpose and create freedom for yourself and others from that state. You're just not going to. You're going to be lost. Maybe you'll end up on medication, or how depressions can be in place for years and years. So you do have to rise up that scale into maybe courage, maybe acceptance, maybe peace. But if you think that peace is the destination, this is where the trap is. Because you might notice in spiritual communities, of which I was, part of many from one distance or another, that they hang on to the bliss state by their fingernails, like I was. And it causes denial of all of this lower energy stuff. And so by using the high state to, rather than think that you arrived and you're so great and it's just everybody else that needs to wake up and get enlightened, you use that high state as a way to go and do much deeper healing work. And the fact is that when you finish and complete all your own healing work, you're just going to have to go to work for others. So this becomes a much more grounded kind of a spirituality. I do see us as half spirit and half matter, or half water, and the interaction and the impregnation of spirit with matter, turning our physicality into a kind of love affair, that our souls love the embodiment, that we're not in a cage. It's totally sort of anti-Gnostic in that respect, that this is not a curse or a prison that we're in, that this is the biggest blessing that God has given us. The word God is very problematic, and I've interviewed Anna Reitort and Mark Archer recently, and the word God, it unfortunately has no meaning, but it has meaning for me because I've always called that life force by the name God. Demons, there are, I believe I've had many firsthand experiences with demons, and not even that long ago. And I have a very different disposition on them. I have pretty much zero fear of them. It's very, very uncommon that I would experience fear anymore, because I know how to release. And, so I can't prove that there's demons out there, but the technique to dealing with them is treating them as if they are in here. So releasing the fear, right? That all of, whether it's demonic entities or people who act like demons, who might be soulless, or even a different lineage of humanity altogether, like Mark Archer talks about, then we have that ability to release the fear, to be porous instead of a wall of resistance that is going to create more power for whatever it is that is, trying to feed off you or whatever. And then even very recently realizing that they used to come more one at a time. One night a crowd showed up, and I just started saying this came out of the blue, that one at a time, I was for the first time in a long time overwhelmed, like, oh my God, a crowd. And then I just had the idea to let them all know one at a time that Jesus loves them. Now, I did spend some time in the last 4 years trying to reclaim my Christian roots, where I came from. I started reading the Bible again. I tried to make friends with Christians. It didn't go very well, Nachiketa. I still was able to glean some beautiful truths out of the Bible, but that whole religion is such a mess. I can't go there anymore. Most of them have divorced me now. They don't want anything to do with me because I'm not really on the map, and I still believe in oneness because that's my direct experience. But there is something about Jesus, and I don't even know, is that an archetype? Is that an egregore? Is that, a spirit that truly does live in the heart and soul of every living, breathing human being that is here of great service? And I can deal with those demons just by saying, either, Jesus, could you help me with this? Or I'll say directly to the demon something, and I didn't plan to say that, I didn't think of that, but I'll just say, Jesus loves you, and poof, they dissipate, and the peace and the freedom is completely restored. So that's in a nutshell where I'm at with my spiritual life.
Yes, well, I think everybody appreciates you coming on today and sharing your life and your story. And for sure, we could probably go on for another time, and I hope to have another conversation with you someday, Beth. And thank you so much for being here. Do you have any last songs that you like to share with the audience? And then I will probably play a song that I think might be appropriate for our interview, and then we'll call it a day for now.
Nice. This has been a really wonderful experience. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thunder Chicken, nice to see you. And so just since I saw that comment there, that if anybody here is listening and would like to be part of a community that is definitely not a cult, it's called the House of Free Will. That's the highest ideal, is freedom and the ability to choose, that very often human beings forget they have and don't exercise properly. Inside the House of Free Will is the Free Will Coaching Guild, where people are receiving training and one-on-one coaching. And I have a number of coaches that are available if I am not, for some reason. So there's many trained now, or many, I mean, more than me trained. We're still not a huge number. I only take 15 students at a time. But so you can join. It is a private membership association, so you can fill out an application, and then we will get back to you with the agreement. It's kind of on the formal side, so that it's truly respected in the private. That's a whole big story of its own. Maybe we could talk about another time, the whole private public domain thing. And I do have a number of courses. As Justin was saying, he's Primal Power alumni, and that's available as an online course if you want to do it before I run a group again. The Find Your Sacred Purpose course is a good one to look at the foundation of what does freedom actually mean to you in your life, and how is that going to look, and how could you walk every day knowing that there is a purpose for your existence, and potentially to have everything that happens in your life be in alignment with that purpose, so you gain energy from that. And I think you already shared a link to my book journey, which is a really good start to getting a window into my work. I am doing the audiobook, so I don't know exactly how long the production. I'm about 2 chapters from finishing the recording, and then who knows what that production involves, but that will be coming out at some point. And yeah, the House of Free Will is a lot of fun. This week we had a Star Trek event, which I didn't expect, but because I had interviewed Mark Archer, who has a lot of firsthand knowledge of the Hebrew in the Bible and all kinds of things that we don't think it says, but it does, and things that we think it says and it doesn't, and then how that ties into some of the Star Trek episodes. So we had a Star Trek event for the House of Free Will members. It was super fun. We watched the episode together and discussed all this very deep, meaningful content after. And we have a workshop with Matt Presti tomorrow coming on. So if you were to apply for the House of Free Will now at my website, bethmartins.com, it would probably be in time to work with him on in a workshop called Harnessing the Creative Drive. And that this is spring. It's time to create. To me, creation is the answer to the destruction, or the antidote to the destruction. And it's the antidote to the control mechanisms that they use on us. Because as long as we are productive creators, we answer to the source of creation, not to those controllers. And that's what they're afraid of. And that's what they go out of their way to make sure we are not inspired and we are not creating to our vision. So yeah, you're most welcome to apply for that. And I create the application process partly also just to make sure we're all like-minded. That means that nobody in the House of Free Will loves to put poison injection in their body, or they don't like standing on stickers, and they don't like the government telling them what to do. They're more freedom minded, and they care about humanity. They care about making a difference in the world and living a meaningful life. So I think that's all. I will have that course coming up on the nurturer archetype. I've been threatening that for a great deal of time, so you can watch out for that, so people can have good boundaries and help at the same time.
Yeah, well, I fully endorse all that, and I fully agree with everything you just said about being free and not getting the pokey pokey and not being told what you can and cannot do, et cetera, et cetera. So I definitely appreciate that sentiment, and thank you so much for being here, Beth. And I hope that we will have another opportunity to talk in the future.
Fantastic, Nachiketa. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thanks for asking all of those personal questions.
I hope I didn't pry too much.
Yeah, I don't mind as long as it's challenges that I've overcome. I feel like there's always something that people could learn from that. So, I mean, my life is a pretty open book. I always see people benefit from sharing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to put you in the back and myself. I'm going to end with a song. And thank you so much, the audience members, everybody who was over at Beth's channel and over at Facebook, over at my channel. So thank you so much for being here and take care, everybody.
Love, devotion, feeling, emotion. Don't be afraid to be weak. Don't be the proud to be strong. Just look into your heart, my friend. That will be the return to yourself. The return to innocence. The return to innocence. If you want, then start to laugh. You must, then start to cry. Yourself, don't hide. Just believe in destiny. Don't care what people say. Just follow your own way. Don't give up and use the chance. You return to innocence. That's not the beginning of the end. That's a return to yourself. The return to innocence. Let's return